Welcome back to Poorly Educated Today in the News, where the world is running like a broke lawnmower with premium gas in the tank, smoke coming out the side, and somebody in Washington still saying it just needs a little more throttle. Segment 1. Hormuz is closed and everybody brought a bigger boat. The biggest mess on the table right now is still the war between the United States, Israel, and Iran, which has gone from strategic pressure to global stress migraine with aircraft carriers. The U.S. blockade around Iran has now redirected 100 commercial vessels, which sounds impressive until you remember that world trade is not a county fair parking lot where you can just wave semis into the overflow field. CENTCOM is basically standing in the Persian Gulf like a bouncer at the worst nightclub on earth, saying nobody gets in, nobody gets out, and yes, your oil tanker is on the list. They have carriers, aircraft, Marines boarding tankers, and enough military hardware floating around to make the ocean look like it lost a game of battleship. Meanwhile, Iran has been mining waters, harassing ships, and treating the Strait of Hormuz like a private driveway with a "Beware of drone boats" sign nailed crooked to the fence. And the whole thing has that special government flavor where every solution looks like it was cooked in a microwave with the fork still in it. The first big decapitation strategy was supposed to make Iran fold, but instead, the regime patched together an interim leadership council faster than my cousin patches a muffler with soup cans and prayer. Now the U.S. is looking at more strikes. Israel is watching close. Gulf states are begging everybody not to set the whole region on fire, and Pakistan is stuck playing peace messenger like the substitute teacher in a classroom full of chainsaws. The grounded truth is that blockades can squeeze a country, but they also squeeze everybody connected to that waterway, and buddy, the whole planet has a straw in that milkshake. So now we got war planners, oil traders, diplomats, and regular folks all staring at the same map, wondering why the richest countries on Earth keep solving problems like raccoons trying to operate a forklift. Segment 2. Gas prices hit the wallet like a cinder block with receipts. Now all that military thunder is rolling straight into the gas pump, because apparently the global economy is just one long garden hose and somebody parked a tank on it. Gas is sitting around $4.55 a gallon nationally, which means filling up your truck now feels less like transportation and more like adopting a second mortgage that smells like unleaded. Oil shot past $100 a barrel and even climbed way higher, because when the Strait of Hormuz sneezes, every wallet in America catches pneumonia. The administration keeps saying prices will drop rapidly once the fighting stops. But that sounds like when a mechanic says, "This should be a cheap fix," right before he walks back holding a part that looks expensive and disappointed. Energy prices rise fast on panic, but fall slow because the economy has the reflexes of a sleepy possum in a gravel road. And it ain't just gas either, because that region is tied into fertilizer, shipping, food prices, aluminum, helium, and every other weird thing nobody thinks about until it disappears, and your grocery bill starts acting possessed. Fertilizer getting disrupted means farmers pay more, food producers pay more, and then we pay more. Because somehow the final bill always lands on regular people like we ordered the war with a side of onion rings. This is the kind of economic chain reaction where a tanker gets blocked near Iran and 6 months later, a guy is staring at a $9 box of cereal whispering, "What did Tony the Tiger know? And when did he know it?" The grounded point is simple. Energy shocks do not stay in energy. They ooze into everything like spilled gravy on a paper plate. And while regular folks are doing gas station math with the face of a hostage negotiator, Washington is trying to pretend the pain is temporary, manageable, and definitely not tied to the giant international fireball they keep feeding with a leaf blower. Segment 3. The Fed gets a new driver while the economy is in a ditch. With prices jumping around like a squirrel in a feed store, the White House has now got Kevin Warsh sworn in as the new Federal Reserve Chair, replacing Jerome Powell after a long public pressure campaign over interest rates. That is already a touchy situation because the Federal Reserve is supposed to be independent, not a dashboard knob the president turns when the economy starts making raccoon noises. Warsh came in promising reform, lower inflation, stronger growth, and higher take-home pay, which is a beautiful list. Right up there with free tires, honest cable bills, and the printer will work the first time. But the problem is this inflation is being driven by war, oil disruptions, shipping paralysis, and supply shocks, not because Americans suddenly got too fancy and bought one extra pack of hot dogs. Cutting rates in that situation can be like trying to cool down a burning barn by throwing cheaper matches at it. And the politics of this are about as subtle as a rooster in a courtroom. Trump says he wants the Fed independent while also wanting help stimulating the economy, which is like saying the dog is free to make his own choices as long as he chooses the couch you pointed at. Critics are already calling Warsh a loyalist, and whether that is fair or not, the perception alone matters because money runs partly on trust, and trust is harder to rebuild than a pontoon boat after a cousin named Dale improves it with fireworks. The grounded concern is that if people believe monetary policy is being bent to serve election season instead of long-term stability, inflation expectations can get loose, and once that horse leaves the barn, it does not come back just because you yelled "America first" at the pasture. So now we have war inflation, political pressure, a new Fed boss, and a public that just wants groceries to stop acting like luxury imports from Mars. Segment 4. Tulsi leaves, intelligence shifts, and the loyalty machine keeps grinding. While the economy is wobbling, the national security crowd is having its own family reunion in a thunderstorm because Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has announced she is resigning effective June 30th. Officially, she is leaving because her husband has a rare form of bone cancer and she needs to be his caregiver. And that part deserves basic human respect because real life does not pause just because Washington is addicted to drama. But the political subtext is louder than a leaf blower at sunrise, because Gabbard had already clashed with the White House over Iran intelligence and the justification for this war. She once testified that Iran was not actively building a nuclear weapon, and Trump publicly brushed that off like a man ignoring the check engine light while smoke spells out, "Turn around." When your intelligence chief says one thing and the war machine says another, that is not a disagreement. That is the dashboard detaching from the truck. Now Aaron Lucas is stepping in as acting DNI, and his background is much more traditional intelligence world, with CIA experience and a reputation for criticizing the intelligence community as bloated and risk-averse. That could mean discipline, or it could mean the administration wants fewer speed bumps between the Oval Office and the next round of strikes. And buddy, there is a difference between streamlining government and turning it into a conveyor belt that stamps approved on whatever plan already has smoke coming out of it. The grounded issue is not whether every internal critic is correct, because nobody in Washington has a perfect batting average unless the sport is self-preservation. The issue is whether a government at war can still tolerate dissenting analysis, or whether every office slowly becomes a loyalty-themed escape room where the only way out is agreeing harder. Segment 5. Rubio goes to India while America tries to juggle fire. And because one global crisis apparently was not enough seasoning, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is in India trying to steady the Indo-Pacific side of the chessboard while the Middle East side is already missing pieces and smoking. His visit is about trade, defense, energy, critical technology, and keeping India close as China watches the region like a neighbor peeking through blinds during a police visit. India matters because it is a massive economy, a major strategic partner, and extremely vulnerable to oil disruptions, which means the war near Iran is not some distant map problem to New Delhi. If Hormuz stays jammed up, India feels it in energy prices, shipping routes, fertilizer costs, and economic planning. Same as everybody else with factories, farms, and people who prefer not to pay rocket fuel prices for regular fuel. Rubio is basically trying to sell reassurance while the global supply chain is making that old washing machine noise right before it walks across the laundry room. At the same time, the attempted peace channels are still running through Pakistan, which is acting as the go-between because direct U.S.-Iran trust is currently buried somewhere under 6 months of missiles and bad decisions. The collapsed Islamabad talks still hang over everything like a busted porch roof, and now everybody is waiting on messages from Iran's interim leadership while the Pentagon keeps strike plans warm on the stove. That is diplomacy in 2026. One hand holding an olive branch, the other hand measuring the parking lot for bombers. And then, in the background, the government drops UFO records, starts enhanced Ebola screening, SpaceX launches a giant starship, and the Postal Service releases Revolutionary War stamps like the country is multitasking through a nervous breakdown. The grounded point is that America is stretched across war, prices, public health, technology, elections, and diplomacy all at once. And the punchline is, we are doing it with the calm, strategic focus of a man trying to barbecue during a tornado while arguing with his lawnmower. In conclusion, today's news is one giant reminder that global chaos does not stay global for long. It comes home in gas prices, grocery bills, political fights, military decisions, and that uneasy feeling that the people steering the truck might be arguing over the radio while the bridge is out. The war is feeding the economy is feeding the politics is feeding the war, and regular Americans are stuck in the middle holding receipts like evidence at a crime scene. So fill up your tank, check your pantry, and maybe be nice to your mailman. Because at this point, the most stable institution in America might be a stamp with a musket on it.